Good morning, everybody. Okay, we're here to do data. And let's see, about 10, 12 years ago, I did my first AfPIF, and that was in Maputo. And what happened at the time, we had a few subcables that were on the east side and the west side that were activated, and we saw a lot of growth. But in Maputo, first time, all we talked about was the East Coast and how the East Coast is so developed and how the East Coast is doing this and that. So at that time, I got up and talked about the West Coast, because I always have to represent West Side, so I'm trying to do West Side here, but West Side, okay? Sorry, Kenya, I love you guys too, but we're in Nigeria right now, so okay. So West Side, West Coast, Best Coast for this presentation. So what I'm going to be talking about today, I'm going to start off comparing East Coast to West Coast, because besides South Africa, of course, where we're seeing a lot of the growth is in Kenya and, of course, Nigeria. So let's go do a historical and look back at trends in the East and West Coast, looking at the subcables, the increase of international capacity and prices. And then after that, we'll look at Africa in general and do some comparisons and look at capacity and pricing again. And then the last part, we'll talk about demand, where all the demand is coming from and what that looks like. And it's looking particularly good, of course, for Nigeria. So with that, let's go and look. Okay, and also remember, I say this every time, but all the data that is collected for this is data collected from a lot of you, and we aggregate it and put it into lots of charts that you're going to see, and that's what usually you're here to see, is the charts. Okay? Yeah. No, mostly the charts, but thanks. And let's see. All of this data is fresh and new. I mean, the 2025 data. And it hasn't been published yet, so I do this especially for AfPIF, because AfPIF rocks. Okay, let's start off on the East Coast. East Coast. This is a view of the subcables right now. And if we go back in time, pre-2002, there was a single cable in Djibouti connected to Yemen. And that was it. So south of Djibouti, nothing. And then when we see about 2010 is when everything starts picking up, both on the East and West Coast. On the East Coast, we saw CCOM in 2009, Teams as well as 2009, and Easy. And this is where we see things really start to roll. And then more recently in 2022, 2023, we see more cables coming on, especially to Africa, which is kind of a game changer. And this is a look at the different countries along sub-Saharan, not including North Africa here. Sorry, guys. So all the Egyptians come running up to me afterwards complaining. I'm very sorry. But I went to Cairo last year just to do it for you guys, so if any of you are here, we did it then, not this time. Today is Nigeria. Okay, Djibouti, of course, has the most cable landings with 12. A lot of these, the difference with Djibouti, though, than with Kenya is Djibouti is more of a transit hub versus Kenya, which there's a lot, basically it's a destination, or, as we'll talk about a little bit later, it's a connection to other parts of East Africa. But we see Kenya is number 2 with 8, very similar to Nigeria. And then we have Somalia, a ton of landings actually, 6, and down the line. Interesting thing though is that on the East Coast, all the countries do have multiple cable landings, whereas that isn't the case in the West Coast. But West Coast, of course, has a ton of countries. So let's look at the West Coast. West Coast, earliest major international cable was what? Without looking, do you know? That was running on the West Coast? SAT-3. Yes, very good. SAT-3. SAT-3 was the first. SAT-3 was great. Completely, different model in the sense of landing in a lot of different areas, but something that held it back was the landings were controlled by the incumbents, so capacity didn't increase as much and prices didn't drop as much as was hoped for. But then the real first wave of new private and consortium international cables was Main 1, GLOW, and then ACE and WAX. And that's where we really see things start to roll. And then the second wave, much more current, just in 2023 and 2024, we see Equiano come online, and that really was a game changer. And we'll see with To Africa anytime now, right? On the west side, we'll see that'll be a game changer as well. And this is just a look at the different sub-cables, the sub-landings. In the dark blue is the pre-2002 and earlier. We see that there were only 6, 7 countries that had landings. But then when we see the second wave, we see that all of the countries, especially with ACE, hits a lot of these countries that didn't have cable landings. And since cross-border fiber is fairly rare, or has been, this was a problem. We didn't see international capacity connecting to other locations, but we're starting to see a little bit of movement there. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And then in the red is the 2023 and later, a lot of landings. Yeah, you guessed it, Nigeria #1 with 8, and which is the same as on the East Coast with Nairobi and with Kenya. And you can go down the line there and see. Now, one thing we'll compare is prices. Now, at the time, about 10 years ago, pricing, east side was much lower than the west side, much, much lower. Here we're looking at 10G wave pricing. Pre-2019, Lagos, anything on the west was double the cost of east. And then we see in 2020, pricing come to about the same level. And we've seen since then prices very similar for the two coasts. For IP transit, which kind of follows with the 10G waves, same thing. Up to about 2019, extremely different prices. East Coast was about half of West Coast, and then we see around 2019, we see the competition prices dropping and capacity rising on the West Coast. And then this is a look at capacity, international capacity. And up until 2023, West Coast, even though it had fewer countries, was always leading, well, in this for Kenya versus Nigeria anyway, but this is actually proxy for East versus West, was Kenya has been ahead. But with Equiano coming online, if you remember, there were cable cuts at the time, so what happened is a lot of people added capacity on Equiano. Equiano scored there, but they also kept their capacity that was cut on other cables, so we saw a huge amount of capacity growth at that time, and now Nigeria is leading with the most international capacity compared to Kenya. You go, guys. Okay, now we've been looking at the international capacity. Let's look at how this is composed. Since for AfPIF we're talking about building the intra-African capacity, let's look at the European versus the intra-African. So the light blue is international capacity that's connected to other African countries, so intra-African. The dark blue is connectivity back to Europe. If we look at South Africa and Nigeria, you'll see actually this year is the first year that South Africa is about half intra capacity and half back to Europe. So that's pretty big. It's a big change. It's always been about 60-40. Because even though South Africa is probably the most interconnected for Africa, intra-African, the size of the pipes going from Europe are much, much larger than the ones going within Africa. So there's always been, even though they're well connected, it's been more capacity to Europe rather than to Africa. But now we're seeing it even out, which is kind of exciting. Well, to me anyway. And then if we look at Nigeria, Nigeria is still very heavy on connectivity to Europe and not as much intra. There's some to Ghana, we'll look at that in a second. But if we look on the East Coast, if we look at Kenya, it's a different story. They are very interconnected within Africa, and the amount of capacity back to Europe is actually much lower than the intra. So they're more of an African, intra-African hub. And then we see this, I just threw DRC in because we were there last year, which is pretty interesting that most of their capacity too is to other African countries, which was a surprise to me at first. Okay, and a quick look at where and why. If you look at Nigeria, you look at the top two. This is connectivity, what countries the international capacity is connected to. And if in Nigeria, number 1 and number 2 are United Kingdom and Portugal. And that makes up about 65% of all the international capacity. And then you see South Africa and Ghana pop up. Ghana, of course. But South Africa, we're seeing a lot more capacity growth between Nigeria and South Africa. And that's kind of the first step. That's big. And then for Kenya, though, we see, if you look at the first 3, the largest amounts of capacity are to other African countries. You see South Africa, Uganda, and Djibouti. And then you get to France. Okay. So different patterns, very similar growth, but different patterns of connectivity. Okay, now let's look at Africa. Now this, we have a new cartographer, so the maps are a little bit different this year. So connecting to Europe. With this map, what we see is a lot of the capacity like we were talking about is connected back to Europe. And it's always, if you're in North Africa, it's almost 99%, almost 100% of their international connectivity is back up to Europe, looking for content, of course. And Sub-Saharan has kind of been stuck on the 80-20, but it's been dropping. And now we're seeing in Sub-Saharan Africa, there's been a lot of movement in intra-African growth versus back up to Europe. So we're really starting to see the dial move there. But in this image, we see this is all international capacity. You see a ton of it still goes to the UK, Portugal, Spain, France, Italy. But it gets better when we look at the intra. Okay, this is a look at international IP capacity for the top countries. Here we're really focusing on 3-year CAGR, so where we've seen the most growth recently. So we see topping the chart is Burkina Faso, Zambia, and Nigeria. Go Nigeria. In Burkina Faso, a lot of growth there. We're going to see some of the routes there. It's pretty interesting. But if you notice, all of these are over 50% growth. So it's still already? Oh man, I got to cruise. Okay. So a ton of growth, and we're just going to pop through these. If we look at West Africa, we see Burkina Faso on top, Chad, but as a smaller base, and Nigeria still ranks up there in the highest growth areas. A quick look at pricing. If we look at 10 gig IP, last year it was the East Coast was kind of flat and slow, where West Coast was eroding very quickly. Here we're seeing that Nairobi and Kampala are about the same as Johannesburg and Lagos, dropping fast, 30%, and where in Ghana has slowed down a little bit. And if we look at pipe import versus local IP, this is kind of super interesting too. We see Nairobi, Accra, Lagos, and Johannesburg. That's actually cheaper now to do the local IPT versus doing the pipe import. It's only in Abidjan because it's still a little bit cheaper to do the pipe import. And this is the map everybody's waiting for. This is a look at 2021, and this is a little bit different from the other maps we used to see. The circles are total capacity within the country, and the circles are will only show the intra-African, doesn't show total capacity. So we see in 2021, lines are growing still. You see like Kenya and South Africa is the largest intra-African, and to Zimbabwe as well. But we're starting to see a little bit more growth toward Nigeria, and then bam, post 2023, 2025, here's we see like a ton of growth. A lot of this, of course, with the cable cuts and adding capacity, et cetera. But we see a lot of growth, especially the most important one with the most growth right now is Nigeria back to South Africa. We're seeing a lot of movement there. And then what the heck is going on this in Burkina Faso? You're seeing these huge lines. You're seeing something similar to what you're seeing in the east with Uganda, Rwanda, et cetera. And a lot of this is probably due to this guy who looks like a football player who's super tall. Anyway, you know who I'm talking about. And so here we're seeing a lot of growth, looking good. And the new map person put this as a GIF, so we can do this as we're talking. But here you can get an idea of where capacity is growing in Africa. Okay, now let's look at the demand. What does it look like for demand? I'll try to go through this quickly. First, looking at interconnection hubs. This is just, we're looking at about 40 different data sets to figure out, to compare different metros to see where the best hubs are, and comparing Nairobi and Lagos. Very, very similar, very close. Maybe Lagos has a few more data centers, maybe a little bit more ASNs, et cetera, for internet exchanges. Pricing is very similar. Cloud infrastructure right now, Nairobi is a little bit ahead of Lagos, but we're seeing growth in Lagos too, so we'll see that probably flip around. Local access, just, a lot more people in Nigeria, so we're going to see a lot of growth there. And geography, demographics better here, and maybe possibly a little bit easier to work in Nairobi, and that's it. So they're both looking good. Quickly going through the top ranking metros, Johannesburg, Cairo, Cape Town leading, but hey, number 4 and 5 are Lagos, pretty much neck and neck, so I could go either way. Biggest gainers, where we're going to see a lot of growth in the next 3 years, Cairo, Nairobi, Johannesburg, Djibouti, and there's Lagos. Good job, guys. Okay, top ranking, let's just looking at the West, Lagos, Accra, Luanda, Windhoek, Dakar. Oh, Dakar make it up there. Biggest gainers, Lagos. Good job, guys. Okay, 5 minutes, and then 10 more minutes afterwards. Okay. Internet penetration. Hey, all right. Look at Nigeria. 39%, but this was in 2023. Sorry, I'm relying on World Bank, but if you look more recently, it's looking like it's pushing up to 50% internet penetration. And you can go through those numbers at your leisure when you get this. And looking at mobile penetration in Kenya, a lot of 4G growing, 5G up there, so we're seeing there's a lot of growth. There's a lot of opportunity to grow. Looking in Nigeria, it looks kind of funky. What is all this drop? But this one, mobile operators directed to block SIMs, linked to it, so it looks like there's a huge drop, but really it's just taking out numbers that didn't really exist. So you see that's mostly affects the 3G and 2G, but if you look at 4G and 5G, you see growth. And then fixed broadband, not penetration, 1.5 million, 33% growth last year, but you're seeing a ton of growth in fiber. Different story in Nigeria, still fixed wireless access, not a lot of fiber yet, but that's on its way. 4G, here's where you see the growth. It's going good. Nigeria is way up there. I'm sorry, I'm going to blow through the last one so we can maybe have a question or two. And fixed broadband, west side, here's what you're seeing. Nigeria way up there, and still one of the fastest growing markets as well, which is a very good, positive thing. And then quickly, looking at internet exchanges, it's kind of a newish map. This is looking at the number of ASNs, and if you look at the blue, it's 2024, and the new ASNs that are added are in the orange, the 2025. And this gives you an idea of what IXs are adding a lot of ASNs. Of course, it's easier to see, and it blows the scale when you do South Africa, but you see in both Nigeria and in Kenya a lot of growth there, a lot of stuff going on. And then data center geography, same thing. The red is carrier neutral. We have to talk about, I'm not going to talk that long about it, but we hear about, oh yeah, there's over 200 data centers in Africa, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But a vast majority of those are probably small, not really for colo. They're carrier data centers, which maybe teeny tiny. If we look at the carrier neutral, a much smaller subset, about a third of that. So we're looking at more like 70-ish carrier neutral data centers in Africa. In this, you can see it's the red versus the blue. And this is just another look at how that's broken out, but about a third are carrier neutral, which is important. And lastly, very briefly look at the cloud landscape, which is very important because once you start getting the big content providers, the cloud providers building out, you're getting a lot of very localized content. And that's where you see the traffic patterns and the capacity change. And so here we see there's 7 live and 4 planned cloud regions in Africa. South Africa, of course, has the most regions with 6, 4 in Joburg, 2 in Cape Town. But we're seeing, in the most recent come online, Joburg and Cairo. but we see planned regions in Kenya and Morocco and local zone in Nigeria. So good, the cloud is here, it's moving, you're seeing a lot more content, and all that is good. So, why is that way? So, the big news, kind of what's coming, what's in the pipe. Of course, when True Africa goes live, it'll mess up all of our numbers in a good way, and we'll see a lot of movement in pricing. You see a little pricing dropping, of course, ahead of time, but when things go live, it'll drop a lot more. Less dependency on the European content. We're seeing with the intra growth and with True Africa coming online, that'll help out a lot. We talked about the demand is looking very good because we're still a lot of growth, a lot of growth in 4G, and a lot going on with fiber. Yes, I'm almost done. And then, so in my humble opinion, yes, Nigeria is poised for high growth. A lot of infrastructure going in right now, so super exciting time. So I'm glad we could be in Nigeria this year to talk about it. And that's it for the presentation, but I can talk for hours more if you let me. And so you can come and talk to me individually, and we can chat about this if you'd like. And then I guess I don't know if we have time for questions, but if not, you can question. Oh, we do? Okay. Ben, fourth row. Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah. What's that? Oh, you do have a mic there? Okay. Just yell it out. No, I'm just kidding. I guess you have to go up to the mic.
Good morning. This mic is working. Yes, so my Uber driver, who took me from the airport to the hotel this morning, he's now my economic and political advisor for Nigeria. I asked him, if you want good internet in Lagos, what's the best provider? He told me, get Starlink. It's the most reliable. So I'm wondering, do you have any data on the traffic of satellite providers in Africa? And maybe you can't share, but what sort of growth are you seeing? We're seeing more of them. They're starting to appear in other geographies as well. But generally, what would be the trend of satellite traffic compared to that subsea and other types of traffic? Thank you.
No, we don't have that data. Next question. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. And we talk about this a lot. Satellite, for the long haul aspect of satellite, it's very teeny tiny amounts of capacity versus subcable. So in that sense, very small. But we do see, of course, a lot of this local traffic going to Starlink and satellite. So in that sense, as access providers, we're seeing a ton. So, but we don't, the way we track capacity, we're looking really at the international side, and it's hard for us to track. We don't really do kind of the local access traffic. But yes, there's no doubt that Starlink and others, you're seeing a ton of growth on the local side, local access side. Okay. Ben, the Bens. We need a third.
All the Bens.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, as always, Patrick. So you called out to Africa West, we're all super excited, talk about pricing. We're in lovely Lagos, we're in Nigeria. What do you think about the second to Africa landing in Nigeria and what that's going to do to the internet ecosystem here? So the one away from Lekki in Kuala Lumpur. Apologies for my pronunciation.
Yeah. I mean, pre-landing, of course, you already see in terms of pricing, you see kind of the pre-gamers that they know it's coming in, you see prices start to come down. This is general, this is based on historical trends that we see. We see pricing-wise a drop before and then a drop after of like 20%. Maybe because Equiano came online not too long ago, and we saw prices drop at that time. Maybe it won't be as fast of a drop, but there'll still be a drop. In terms of capacity, yeah, we see a lot of increase in capacity. And since it's kind of an open access, we'll see a lot of more competition there. We'll see a lot of capacity growth in that sense too. And you're saying because you have multiple landings in
Yeah, sorry, the question was more directed to what do you think the second landing's going to do for the internet ecosystem and infrastructure reliability in Nigeria?
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. It's hard to say because in Africa it's hard to compare with other locations because there aren't a lot where we see this. So we do see, of course, with Nigeria, everything is Lagos-centric. So everything growing here. And if you go anywhere else in the world, you want to see the redundancy and multiple locations. So in that sense, great for redundancy. We're seeing secondary markets grow like crazy. And I think it's a way, of course, to really start building out within Nigeria. So it isn't just Lagos, but we're seeing the big growth. And maybe we'll see that lead to kind of the local competition and on a smaller scale, drop the prices and increase capacity within the country. Because there's so much in Nigeria, and it's really, we're all going out of Lagos, but there's this huge amount of, population, infrastructure, et cetera, it's north that we don't see getting touched at all. So it'll do good things, I'm sure. But, I'm interested to see what's going to happen, because I don't know either, so it'll be great. Okay, thank you.
Good morning,
I know what your question is. Yes. What about the little countries? Okay, but you can ask. Go for it.
Yes. Yes, it's me again with my selfish question of every year. So, so my question is about who are the bad students, because you always talk about all the people all the countries that are doing great things.
Yeah.
But we also want to know who needs to improve, not to name and shame again.
Yeah.
But it's just for us to know where should we put our efforts. So
Right. In a lot of these slides, if you go back through them, you can see where, of course, I don't do these are the least connected, least whatever countries, a little bit. But if you look, and for example, in the subcable landing slide, you see all of the countries that only have a single cable landing. Of course, these are areas where you'd need a lot of work. And the problems there, and we've talked about this other times, and I think at a conference not too long ago in Senegal, we're talking about the cross-border in the terrestrial fiber that has been missing. And it's kind of, you have the subcable landings and then a whole bunch of islands, but there's not a lot of connectivity between countries, which is a little bit different from what we see in the East. We're starting to see growth there, but there's a lot of work to be done. Even, the bordering countries of Nigeria, more connectivity, more capacity there. So it is more intra-African, and you're not relying only on subcables. But, that's a little bit harder to build, and more costly, et cetera, so it's moving at a slower rate. So if you go back through the slides, you can take a look there, and then, I could talk there. But, hey, shiny, bright spots, if you see what's happening in Burkina Faso, you're seeing a ton of growth there, whereas 5 years ago, you don't see anything. So that's a good model to take, to apply to some other countries. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Patrick. Michuki Mwangi, Internet Society. So it's great to see the growth in the intra-African routes. A question I have related to that is, what are we seeing from the cost perspective of the intra-Africa in terms of the capacity, whether it's 1 gig, 10 gig, or if there's even 100 gig, and are we seeing an improvement in terms of the costs across the regions? And can we actually compare that with the international IP transit?
Yeah, completely. Of course, I only had one slide that showed that. I showed Kampala versus Nairobi. Prices are still at a premium, very, very high, of course. But we are starting to see movement. And if we use East as kind of like a proxy or an indicator for what's happening for the rest of Africa, we do see, for example, in Uganda and Rwanda, the prices are starting to drop significantly. But it's a slow process, and it'll be a few more years before, it can drop down to the level of subsea pricing.
So is that data available?
Yes, some of it. And you can talk to me directly, and we can go through, and I can show you what's available. But like I said, a lot of the intra-African, and especially in less developed markets, and this is also why there's a focus on the very competitive markets, because guess what? If there's more competition, that means there's more providers, et cetera, there's more data. So that's why it's always very data heavy on the very competitive markets. So as we see more of these terrestrial systems going in, et cetera, we're going to get more and more data. But like I said, if we look at kind of the Nairobi, Uganda, that's a good kind of indicator of what's coming.
All right, and final thing is it possible for us to split that between submarine and terrestrial?
Tricky. I can do it, but then I have to go back to the source. Usually we don't, because we don't want to reveal whose prices or whose capacity where. We're always trying to aggregate. But more and more, I'm kind of doing that on the side so that I can see what the differences are. And very recently, it was very teeny tiny, the terrestrial side. So, but now we're starting to see, like you say, a lot of more 100G, capacity going in. So we're seeing movement there, but we can take a look.
Hello.
Hi there.
Hi. As you know, here in Africa, we rely on just a few interconnection points. So how can we ensure the redundancy or the sovereignty of data in cloud interconnections? How can we faster that?
How can we fast track it?
Yeah.
You tell me. You guys are here to do this, not me. I'm just telling you what's going on. But yeah, that's what, I mean, in a lot of the images, what we're showing with tracking is the building of interconnection points. And actually, second landing, that's a start in Nigeria, because we'll see like ecosystems grow around those landings. But as I said before, it's kind of the chicken and egg, but where we see a lot of significant growth is when you see content or cloud going in and starting to build out, and then ecosystems grow around that. And that's where you see a lot of the interconnectivity and where you really see the growth of kind of interconnection hubs. Okay. So that's what we're pushing towards. But before that, you have to, it's kind of like you get the CDNs in first, then you build a POP, then you have an on-ramp, then so it's a slow process, but a lot of these slides hopefully give you an idea of what's happening, and you see the more developed areas, but you'll see, that we have to mirror those regions to kind of imitate the growth.
Hi, Christian. Thanks for your presentation, though. My first question is on the traffic split between international and local traffic. So for Nigeria, it seems it's 75-70 by your presentation. I would like to know the traffic type. What is in that 75% bucket? Is it video traffic, or are they just purely internet traffic, or what type of traffic?
Yeah, in a lot of that, what we're talking here, we're just talking about internet traffic. I'm not talking about any private networks or like content providers, but this is internet traffic, and a lot of this is really, getting content basically. So we see a lot of the bigger hubs, like in South Africa, Nigeria, and Kenya, would connect back to Europe to hit the big data centers, for example, for cloud, for the content there, and pulling that down. And then we see, for example, in South Africa, as you start to have the cloud providers that are there, and you're seeing more local content, et cetera, that's where you start to see the traffic patterns change. So in Nigeria right now, it's very heavily still focused on Europe, but there's not a lot of network built out, for example, in the neighboring countries. So as that starts to build out, we'll see the traffic patterns change. But we already did see a little bit of change with connectivity back to South Africa. That's very new. So Nigeria has always been like 80 to 85% capacity to Europe, and now it's actually dropped below 80%. So it's on the way. It's starting.
All right, thank you. And that leads me to my next question. You mentioned it a bit. That's the intercontinental traffic pattern based on the content origin. Just like you said, Europe is the path to most of the systems from Africa. But don't you think we might need a traffic analysis that shows where this traffic is going to based on the content origin? I'd just like to know which of the African traffic goes to US, for example, maybe Australia. Yeah.
In other locations beside Europe? Or?
Exactly.
Yeah, it is on that map, actually. You can see it, but it's so small in quantity compared to Europe, it's overshadowed. But you do see a lot more, maybe to the Middle East a bit, a little bit to Asia, and some to the US, but not a ton. It's still very, very small numbers. But you're seeing, as new paths open up, like to South America, you are seeing a little bit of growth there. But it's very, it's very Europe-dominated.
All right, thank you.
Jürgen.
Hey, Patrick.
Hey.
It's Jürgen from Amazon Web Services. First, thanks as always for a great presentation. I see that a lot of my data points very much match yours. I will seek you out over a beer to discuss some of these things, but I had one question that I kind of wanted to socialize here. I'm super excited and happy about the growth that we see in Nigeria, so good job, everybody. I'm also very disappointed about the West African regional connectivity that you mentioned.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, it's your job to gather the data and tell us what's going on, but to flip it around, what needs to happen? And what, in your opinion, who needs to get their stuff together in order to see more better connectivity within West Africa? Because I think that would greatly benefit the countries which are close to Nigeria, which is for sure the West African hub. So in your opinion, what should happen to improve it? Thanks.
To improve just interconnectivity within West
the regional
Africa?
intra-Africa connectivity.
Yeah. For me, the easy answer is like the terrestrial networks. We need to build a lot more cross-border networks, and that's the big start. And to get the pricing down on that, and you get the competition and a lot of paths, and then we'll see growth there. Because we can see it happen. I'm going to pull out Burkina Faso again, but you see it's kind of happening in Burkina Faso in terms of cross-border, a lot of cross-border capacity and traffic. So I think it's Africa, similar to like South America, same, has been very sub-cable focused, which is great to get things started, but we really need the terrestrial within the countries, of course, but cross-border is the most important to really get prices dropping and capacity rising. Hope that helped.
Hi.
Howdy.
So my question is in French.
Uh-huh.
So, je voudrais savoir, est-ce que le manque d'accès à la mer contribue à un frein pour l'accès à Internet au niveau des pays enclavés? Parce que dans la présentation que vous venez de faire, les pays qui sont le plus représentés ont accès à la mer. En dehors de la connectivité locale et de la mise en place des IXP, quelles solutions s'offrent à nous? Merci.
Ok. Je parle français, mais j'ai pas tout compris. Mais au début, c'est quoi? Pourquoi?
Est-ce que le manque d'accès à la mer constitue un frein pour la connectivité au niveau des pays enclavés?
Pour l'accès à la mer?
Oui.
Ok. What's that? Ah oui, qui n'ont pas d'accès sur la... C'est quoi? En fait, c'est la même réponse qu'avant, que il faut avoir plus de réseaux terrestres pour connecter. Et parce qu'en ce moment, il n'y a pas beaucoup et c'est les prix sont très très hauts, très difficiles. Mais si on voit la côte est et on voit ce qui se passe là-bas, on voit que ça commence à changer. Mais c'est le plus facile. La façon de le faire, c'est de construire plus de réseaux, de pas être, comment on dit, quand il y a plus de réseaux, les prix sont plus bas. Et en ce moment, il n'y a pas beaucoup de connectivité entre les pays dans l'Ouest. Et je veux dire, je veux dire que ça va changer bientôt, mais je n'ai pas. C'est un processus très long. On voit un peu avec Orange et tout ça, mais c'est que Orange. Quand il y a beaucoup d'autres qui sont en train de faire la même chose dans l'Ouest, on va voir un peu plus les prix qui baissent. Mais en ce moment, les prix sont assez élevés toujours. Donc, bientôt, bientôt, dans les années qui arrivent, ouais, il faut avoir de concurrence. Sinon, ou l'argent pour construire. J'espère que j'ai répondu, ça va? Okay. Sinon, vous pouvez me parler après, c'est bon. OK.
Bonjour à tous.
Bonjour.
Dans l'essentiel de votre exposé tout à l'heure, vous avez beaucoup plus mis l'accent sur les câbles sous-marins. Et du coup, ma question est de savoir, est-ce que si, en absence de câbles sous-marins, est-ce que les points d'échange ne se forment pas? Et dans les statistiques que vous avez présentées, je n'ai pas suffisamment vu des éléments qui parlent de Starlink, par exemple.
De quoi? Starlink?
De Starlink. Est-ce que, en l'absence de ces données-là, ça ne vient pas un tout petit peu cacher certaines informations, ou bien les statistiques ne sont pas exactement celles qui devraient être? C'est ça ma question.
Mais ouais, encore, j'ai expliqué un peu, on n'a pas beaucoup de données sur, par exemple, Starlink, parce que pour nous, c'est plus comment on dit, le réseau dorsal, le backbone network, et pas de niveau accès. Donc, nous, on n'a pas les données pour faire ça, mais on voit, c'est plus anecdotalement, en parlant avec les gens et tout ça, que oui, c'est très important en ce moment avec satellite, mais pour la plupart de connectivité internationale, c'est toujours, ça dépend de plus les câbles sous-marins. Oui, je ne peux pas vraiment répondre à ça, mais on sait que c'est très important et pour l'accès, on voit beaucoup plus, mais la plupart de connectivité internationale, c'est les optiques, mais câbles sous-marins ici en Afrique, mais les réseaux terrestres aussi, ça joue le plus.
Bon, je pose la question au regard de l'expérience de mon pays, le Cameroun. Il y a beaucoup d'entreprises qui raffolent la connexion Starlink au regard du prix, qui est très abordable. Bon, j'estime que ne pas intégrer Starlink, on peut manquer quelques informations dans les statistiques.
Oui. Mais même pour Starlink, nous, on est, comme je dis, on travaille plus avec les long haul portions, pas l'accès. Donc, pour satellite, on connaît leur grand réseau, mais c'est difficile pour nous de voir les détails là. Oui, mais ça va arriver. Mais en ce moment, il y a beaucoup de croissance, mais c'est très petit par rapport à optique comme câble sous-marin. Okay. Et on peut parler encore plus après pour voir. Je peux aller plus dans les détails.
Ok, thank you.
Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Je suis Doudou Ndiaye de Sénégal Numérique, point d'essence Internet AF-CIX Sénégal. En fait, j'abondais un peu dans le même sens que mon collègue du Cameroun, avec l'avènement du Starlink qui, comme il a dit, est en train de se développer de manière extraordinaire. Et puis, on n'a pas une mainmise sur Starlink côté ASP. Donc, il n'arrive pas dans les ASP qu'on a en Afrique. Bon, je vous dis du Sénégal, il n'arrive pas. Et si on n'y prend pas garde, avec le prix qu'ils sont en train de donner, tout le monde, tous les utilisateurs vont aller vers Starlink, ils n'auront pas les bénéfices du point d'accès qu'on a, du point d'échange qu'on a au Sénégal ou bien dans les pays africains. Évidemment que Starlink a un point où ils vont se connecter sur le câble sous-marin, c'est sûr, ça c'est clair. Il n'y a pas de câble sous-marin sur les satellites, il y en a en bas, il n'y en a pas en haut. Donc, je ne sais pas comment ils vont faire, comment il faut les pousser à être sur un point d'échange, ou bien il faudra imaginer l'interconnexion, c'est sûr qu'ils sont sur un point d'échange, interconnexion des différents points d'échange pour qu'au moins qu'on puisse bénéficier des points d'échange dans les pays comme le Sénégal et autres. L'autre question, c'est que nous, au Sénégal, je ne sais pas si vous voyez, on a le câble Cher que le Sénégal a connecté au niveau de Cap-Vert. On a une connexion cap sous-marin entre Sénégal et Cap-Vert. Maintenant, je voulais savoir, est-ce que c'était un bon choix, bien on aurait dû avoir le choix de se connecter sur un autre opérateur qui vend de l'IP Transit, parce que là, si on veut de l'IP Transit, on est obligé de demander à Cap-Vert de nous faire l'IP Transit. Donc, est-ce que c'est possible de se connecter à un autre gros fournisseur d'Internet pour au moins discuter réellement avec les gros fournisseurs d'Internet que nous avons? C'est ça. Merci.
Okay. Je ne sais pas si je suis vraiment compris, mais encore c'est Starlink et peut-être on peut en parler après de ça, parce que c'est la même chose. On peut en parler après parce que je n'ai pas 100% compris. Et nous, on ne suit pas, comme je disais, Starlink, les détails. On est plus sur des réseaux et on voit comment ça... Il y a des effets sur les réseaux terrestres et sous-marins mais aussi, c'est plus anecdotal. Nous, on ne sait pas exactement à quel pourcentage c'est Starlink ou des autres. On ne sait pas. C'est trop, comment on dit, granulaire pour nous. Donc, je ne peux pas vraiment répondre à ça.
Ok. Après, on se verra en bilatéral.
Ok.
Merci.
Don't worry, I don't have a question. I just wanted to guard the microphone and say no more questions.
Okay. No more questions? Okay.
So thank you very much, Patrick. A round of applause to Patrick. And please, you really need to applaud him because he told me that he speaks French, but he never told me that he was speaking French that well. So thank you very much. So this is a small gift from the PC.
Thank you. Bring it in.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much, Patrick.